Hey everyone, my name is Anthony Herbert. I'm from the Pretty Pretty YouTube channel. In this video, I'll be working with Auth0 to show you how to build a simple Django app that uses Auth0 for authentication. So this app allows users to log in and post a message to a public feed. It also allows those users to report messages from other users. So then a moderator can come in and decide if those messages should be hidden or if the user should be completely blocked from using the app. So as an example, I can log in by clicking this button, and then I can select the provider. So Google, I'll select an account. It logs me in, and we see that I have report buttons here along with an input. I'll say hello world, and we see my message has just appeared. I can go here as a moderator and refresh, and I see the new message. Imagine if I wanted to report a message like this one. Then as a moderator, I can go to reports. I can see the message here and I can remove it. If I refresh here, I see that message was removed. And if I want to block a user, let's say I report this user, I go to reports and then I can block this user, which will block all of the messages for this user and delete the user from the system, or really just inactivate the user. So block. And then we see here, the post for me is no longer there. So this is the app that we'll be building in this video. If you want to follow along, you can click the link in the description below to get the code in the repo for this particular project. Now let's get started. To get started, first thing we need to do is create a virtual environment. So I'll do that here, python-m venv, and then I'll name the environment directory env. I'll go ahead and start that up with source env, then bin, then activate. Next, what I want to do is I want to install Django, of course. So pip install Django, and I'll wait a moment as this installs. Okay, so now that Django has been installed, I want to create the project for this. So I'll name the project feed. So I'll use Django admin, start project, and then feed, which is the name of it. And then I'll cd into that feed directory. And now inside of the feed project, I want to create an app, and I'll call this feed app. So python manage.py start app, and we'll call this feed app. Okay, so if I look at my directory over here, I should see feed for the project and feed app for the one app that I'll have in this example. With the feed app started, I want to go to the project directory and into settings and add the feed app to the installed apps. And now I want to verify that I can actually use the app in some way. So I'll start the server, python manage.py run server. And I have unapplied migrations, but I'll take care of that in a moment. I just want to go to this URL. So I'll copy that and I'll paste it in here. And I see that the install works successfully. So I know I'm good to continue. The next thing I want to handle are the models. So as you saw, I have a bunch of unapplied migrations. And the reason why I didn't apply those migrations before is because I want to create a custom user model. Now, this custom user model really won't do anything special in this tutorial, but it's always a good idea to create it at the beginning if you feel like you would need it, and you'll probably always need it at some point. So it's best to do it right at the beginning, because once you migrate that first time, it's going to be very difficult to go back and add your own custom user model. So to do this, I'll go into my feed app and I'll open up the models.py file. And in here, what I want to do first is I want to import the abstract user class from Django. So to do this, I need from django.contrib.auth.models, and then in there lives the abstract user class. And then I can go ahead and create that class for the custom user. So I'll call this user, of course, and then I'll pass in the abstract user, and I'll just say pass. So I don't need to put anything in here at the moment, but like I said, if I want to modify this later, it'd be easier to do so with this setup than what Django gives you by default. So now that I have that, I can go back to the settings file, and at the bottom, I'll add a configuration value for auth user model, and I'll reference that user model that I just created. So feed app.user, and it should be capital U for the user. And now that I have that, I can go ahead and apply the migrations. And first, I can make the migration. So I have a bunch of failures in here because I was saving as I was typing, and the intermediate saves weren't valid, but it should be okay now. So I'll make migrations. So Python manage.py make migrations. So I can pick up that new user model that I just created. And then I'll go ahead and migrate. So I can migrate all the tables that were given to me by default, plus the user model that I just created. So now that I have that, I'm going to use the Django admin, and I want to have a super user for that. So I'll go ahead and create that now. Python manage.py create super user. And I'll use my first name as the username, my email, and then the password. I'll just put in my typical testing password of password1 with a capital P, and it's too common, but I just bypass it. And now before I can actually use the admin, the last thing I need to do is I need to register the user model on the admin so I can actually see it when I open up the admin. So I'll go over to admin in the feed app, and I'll import the model that I just created. So from .models, import user, and I'll use admin.site register. And for this, I'll need another thing in addition to user. So this would work if user were a regular model, but in addition to user, I need to tell Django admin that this is a user admin part. So I can import that from django.contrib.auth.admin import user admin. And this will allow me to use my custom user model on the admin dashboard. So I'll save that, and I'll go ahead and start up the server. Looks good. I'll then go to admin, and I'll log in with the name that I used and the password. And now I see users here, and everything looks okay. I have one user in the database, of course, me, and everything looks good. So if you make it to this part, then you know the setup part went well for you. So now that the user model is working, I want to focus on the other models that I'll have in this particular app. So I'll go back to the models file. And the first model that I want to create is a post model. So posts, and this is going to inherit from models.model. And now I need to think about the attributes that I want to have on a post. So a user needs to create a post. So I'll have a user. There needs to be some text associated with the post. So I'll have a text. There also needs to be a date associated with it. And then later when I go to add the moderation utilities, I'll need to have attributes that represent if the post is hidden or not hidden. So if it's hidden, that means the moderator removed it from view. And then if it is hidden, I need to know the date that it was hidden, just in case I want to go back and see when this post was hidden. And I also need to have the hidden by attribute so I know who hit the post. So which moderator hides the post. So that won't be implemented right away, but I can add it in the model for now. So we'll have it available later. So I'll start with user. And this is going to be a foreign key to the user model. So foreign key here. And normally you would pass in the name of the class here like user, but because I'm using a custom user model, what I want to do is I want to use the user model defined on settings. So what I'll do is I'll import from settings. So I'll go up here to keep it in order, and I'll say from django.config, so conf, import settings. And then I'll use this settings here to get the user model. So settings.auth_user_model. So that's the setting value that I added before. And then because this is a foreign key, I need to tell it what to do on delete. So I'll say on delete models.cascade, right? So it will just delete any posts that the user has if I were to delete the user. I'll have the text, and this will just be a char field. I'll give it a max length of, let's say, 200. I'll need a date posted. So this will be a date time field. And for this, I want this to be automatically populated every time a new post is created. So I'll use auto add now equals true. Next, I want to cover the fields that have to do with the moderation. So first, hidden, which will be a Boolean. So models.boolean field. I'll default this to false. So when a user first posts, the post won't be hidden and everybody can see it. It will only be hidden if a moderator goes and changes it later. I'll need a date hidden, and this will be another date time field. So date time field, this can be blank. So I'll have blank equals true and null equals true, because by default, the post won't be hidden, so there won't be any date associated with the date hidden. And then finally, I need a hidden by, which represents the user that hit the post. So models.foreign-key again. Once again, I'll use settings auth user model because the person who hides the post will be a user. I'll have on delete as models.cascade again. And also I want to have blank equals true and null equal to true. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want this to be populated at the beginning when the post is first created. This should only be populated if a moderator goes and hides this post. And I see I have an error here, and this is a pretty simple error. I have auto add now when it should be auto now add. Easy mistake to make. So I'll just go ahead and save that. And to see this in the admin dashboard, I'll just add a stir function. So dunder stir, and I'll return just self.text so I can see the post text on the admin dashboard if I were viewing it there. So I'll stop the app and run it again just to make sure that everything is working. And I see I have one additional error here in red, and this just means there's a conflict between the foreign key for the user and the foreign key for hidden by. So notice they both have the auth user model as the foreign key, and normally you would just reference it by the name of the model that you're referencing. So normally when you have one, it will just reference this as user, but when you have two, you have to have a way to distinguish between the two. So for this one, I'll call it mod who hid, and to do that, you use the related name. So related underscore name equals mod who hid. So I can save that, and once I do, the server restarts automatically, and I see I have no more errors. So in addition to the posts, I want a model to represent reported posts. So users will have the ability to report a post that they find is inappropriate or they just don't like, and they want the mods to take a look at it. So I'll create a class called report, and I'll inherit from models.model again. And we have reported by, and that's going to be a foreign key. So as you can imagine, it's going to be foreign key to the settings.auth user model. So models.foreign key, and then settings.auth user model. And of course I need on delete models.cascade. And in addition to having a reported by, I need to know which post was actually reported. So I'll have post here, and I'll say models.foreign key. And this time, since I'm referencing a normal model, I can pass in post here. And then on delete will be models.cascade once more. So I don't really need a stir method here. If you want to add one, you can, but I won't be looking at this directly in the admin dashboard, so I think it's okay. Next, because I have the two models that I want, I can go ahead and make the migrations first. So make migrations here, and then I can migrate them. And then finally, the last thing I want to do is I want to add these two models to the admin dashboard. So I'll open up admin again, and then here I'll do admin.site.register. I'll have the post in just a moment that I'll import, and I'll do the same thing for report. And here I just need to import post and report, and that should be it for adding it to the admin dashboard. Okay, so now that I have the models created and I added them to the admin dashboard so I can look at them later, the next thing I want to do is I want to start building the views for this. So I'll go into views, and in here, I'll create two views, and there will only be two views for this particular app. And one view will be the home page, the index, which will list all the posts that I have. And then another will be the reports page, which will list all of the reports that were submitted by the users. So I'll create two functions here, index, and I'll return render, and I'll pass in requests, and I'll also create a directory in a moment for my templates, but I'll start with the directory here. So the directory is going to be called feed app eventually, and the template will be called index.html. And I'll do the same for another view called reports. And I'll return render requests. And here, I'll just pass in the reports.html page. And of course, I haven't created those yet, but I'll create those momentarily. So inside of feed app, first thing I need to do is I need to create a directory for the templates here. And then inside of the templates directory, I'll create another directory to hold the templates for this particular app. And I'll call this feed app. And then inside of here, I'll create two files, one called index.html and another called reports.html. And finally, because there will be some commonality between both the index and the reports templates, I want to create a third file in the feed app directory called base.html. And this will just be the base template for everything, so I don't have to write it multiple times in both templates. So what I want to do here is I want to create the base template. So what I'll do is I'll start by creating the scaffolding for the HTML, so the doc type and the head tag and the meta. And here for the title, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow the child templates to set the title. So I can create a block here. So block title, and then in block here. Next, I want to link to some external CSS. I'm going to use Bulma as the CSS framework to style everything, just to keep it simple. And I'm just pointing to a CDN. So I just added this here in the head. Next, I want to bring in some code for the hero part of the page, so the top part of the page. And I'll just paste that into body and explain what's going on here. Just need to make sure it's indented correctly and it looks okay. So this will be a hero in Bulma, and we'll see this in just a moment. And basically, I'll have a nav bar. So I'll have a home link on the nav bar. So we see home here. And I'll have a container that holds the title and subtitle that will be set by the child templates. So here I can add a block, and I'll have one for main title. And then in block here. And I'll have one for the subtitle. So one page will have both, and then the other page will only have the main title. And we'll see that once we get to building the child templates. So in addition to having these blocks, I'll put them inside of paragraph tags, so P. And then the class for the first one will just be title. And I'll move the closing tag to the outside of the block. And I'll do the same thing for the subtitle, except the class is subtitle here. And I'll move the paragraph tag. Okay, so now that I have that, what I want to do now is I want to add a section for the actual posts or the reports. So this will be another section, and the class will be section. Inside of here, I'll have a div with class container. And finally, I'll have the block for the actual content of the page. So like I said, on the index, this will be the posts. And for the reports page, this will be the list of reports. So block content, and then in block. Okay, so that should be enough for our base template right now. We'll come back to it, but this should be enough to get us started. And now I want to fill in these blocks inside of the child templates. So first I'll go over to index, and I need to tell Django that I want to extend the base template. So extends feed app / base.html. That's where my template is. Next, I want to set the title for this page. So block title. I want to set the title as home, and then in block here. Next, I'll need the main title block. So block main title, and I'll call this public feed, and in block here, and it just modified that for me, but I think it's okay. So next, subtitle as a block. And for the subtitle, I'll just leave a message. So I'll say, leave a message for everyone to see. And then in block. Finally, I want to have a block for the content. This will be blank. So block content. And of course, this will be filled in later with the actual content of the post. Next, I want to go over to reports. So let me just copy these because they'll be pretty much identical. So I need to extend the feed app / base.html template. For the title, I'll call this reported posts. So reported post here. And for the main title, it will be reported posts as well. And then I'll add a block for the content. So block content in block. Okay, so that is enough for our 2 templates right now. Now that we have our views set up and we have our templates, the last thing I need to do is create URLs for this. To create the URLs inside of feed app, I'll create a new file called urls.py. And let me open that. And I need to import from django.urls the path function. And then I'll import my views. So I'll say from.import views, which will give me all the views in this particular app. I need to create the URL patterns list. And I'll have 2 paths in here. So the first path will just be on the index, so I don't have to put anything for the first argument, just an empty string. I'll use views.index, that's the name of my function, and then I'll just name the path index as well. And then for the reports, I'll have reports / and then views.reports, and I'll name this reports. Okay, so now that I have that, I need to go into the urls.py in my feed directory for the project as a whole. And on line 17, in addition to path, I'll import include. And here I want to add a path on the index again and just have it include all the URLs that I created on the feed app. So empty string for the first argument and then include feed app.urls. And now that I have that, I should be able to run the server. And I'll go over and let's see. So here is the home page and here is the reports page. So it looks like both are working. I have the styles working, and now we can focus on the authentication part. The first step to setting up the authentication with Auth0 is I need to create an application. So when you log into your Auth0 account, this is the screen that you'll see. And what I want to do is I want to go down here to the part where it says integrate Auth0 into your application, and I'll create application here. And the type of application that I want to create is a regular web application. So I'll click this and I'll give it a name. So for this, I'll call this Django Feed App and create. And even though I'm using Django, I'm not going to select Django here. I'm just going to skip integration so I can do all the steps myself. And this is what you should see. So I need to add some things into the settings here. So I'll scroll down to allow to callback URLs. And I need to add some URLs that will allow Auth0 to pass back the credential information once it verifies the user has signed in and authenticated themselves properly. So here, I want to add 127001, so my local host, and complete /auth0. So I won't be creating this myself. Instead, the library that I'll be using momentarily is going to create this for me. And I want to have 2. So I want to have one for 127001, and I also want to have one for localhost, just to cover both cases, because depending on your machine, you may have localhost instead of the numbers for the URL. So HTTP, localhost, port 8000 still, and then complete /auth0. And now for the logout URL, this is the place that Auth0 will send your users when they log out. I'll just put the index. So I'll do one for both domains. And the other one will be localhost. And that's it. So I should be able to save this. And I'll leave this here just in case I made any minor mistakes like a typo. And now I'll go back to my code. And I need to install a couple of things to get the connection between my app and Auth0 working. So I'll install a library called Python Jose. And also I'll install Social App Django. So these 2 libraries work together, and it's mostly Social App Django to connect to Auth0. In addition to Auth0, with Social App Django, you can connect to things like Google or GitHub, but through Auth0, I can also connect to those providers. So I'll just do everything through Auth0, but the library itself is more general than just Auth0, so just keep that in mind. So once I've installed it, I need to add the URLs for Social Django. So I'll go over to the URLs, and I actually have it open here. And I need to include, so on the index again, I'll include URLs for social_Django.urls. Next, I need to go over to the settings and add Social Django to the installed apps. So I'll scroll up and I'll add Social Django. And now I should be able to migrate again because Social Django has some models associated with it. So manage.py migrate, and we see all the models that were added. Next, I need to add some settings to take care of connecting to Auth0 so I can actually use authentication through Auth0. So I'll scroll down to the bottom, and there are a few that I want. So I'll start with the Auth0 settings. And the first one is social auth trailing slash that I want. So social auth, and they'll all begin with this. And then after is the actual specific setting that I want. So trailing slash equals false. And this is just to avoid any issues with the trailing slashes that are normally the pattern in Django and with this particular one. You can have it as true if you want. You just have to update your URLs in the settings. So let me copy the beginning of this because this will start all the settings. And I believe I have 5, so I'll just add 4 more placeholders. And they actually have Auth0 at the beginning as well. And then I have a domain, and let me copy the Auth0 part and just add that. I have a domain, I have a key for Auth0, I have a secret for Auth0, and I also have a scope for Auth0. And the scope will be a list, so I'll just create the list here. And before I get to those, I'll add the values to the list. So for the scopes, I want OpenID, I want profile, and I want email. So those are the things we're asking for from the providers that we go through. So we'll have access to the profile information and most importantly, their email. So we have a way of keeping track of the data associated with the users that authenticate through the different providers that Auth0 allows us to authenticate with. So the domain, the key, and the secret, these will come from the dashboard. So let me go back. And here at the top, we see domain, client ID, and client secret. So I'll just go ahead and copy those and paste those into the code. They're all strings. So that's the domain. The client ID is the key. And finally, the secret is this value here. So I'll reveal it and copy it. And I'll add it here. So I have all the Auth0 settings. Next, I want to set some backends, the authentication backends for Django. So this tells Django how I should authenticate users. So by default, I have the model backend in Django, and that's what allows me to log into the admin dashboard as I did before. But I want to allow the users to log in through Auth0 as well. So authentication backends, which is a set here. And the first item that I want is from Social Core. So this comes from Social Django, socialcore.backends.auth0.auth0auth2. So that's the backend that I need to work with Auth0. And then I'll also use the default Django one. So contrib.auth backends model backend. That's where it's located. And this allows me to continue to log into the admin dashboard. And the final things that I need are the login URL, the login redirect URL, and the log out redirect URL. So the redirect URL for both the login and the log out will just be the index, so slash, but the login URL will be login/auth0. So this is the important part because this will allow us to be redirected to Auth0 so we can authenticate and then we'll be sent back to our app. So if I added all these configuration values correctly, then Social Django and Auth0 will take care of everything for us. So this is all I have to do for the authentication, really. Of course, I'll need a link so the users can log in, and I'll do that momentarily. But this should be all the settings that are necessary for working with Auth0 through Social Django. So to create a login link, I'll go over to my base template and I'll look for the navbar end and here. So this is on my navbar and I want to add an if statement. So if user is authenticated. So if the user is authenticated, I want to display a link to log out. And if they're not authenticated, then I want to display a link to log in. And this shouldn't be in block. This should be in if. So for the if statement, I'll add a link here. The class will be a button. So it appears as a button. The color will be is primary. And the link will be to /logout, right? So this is if the user is logged in, so they are authenticated, and I'll just call this logout. I'll add an else block here, and inside of it, I'll create another button. And the URL for this one will be login/auth0. So that URL that I just put in the settings, and I'll have this as login. So this should be enough. So let me start up the server again and go to the home page. And I see the link in the upper right-hand corner. So this won't work quite yet because I don't have a view for logging out. So if I click log out, I get this page not found. So the reason why it says log out instead of log in is because I'm still logged in on the admin dashboard. Remember, I'm using 2 authentication backends. So I'll just log out here. And then now that I'm back on the home page, I see login. So this should take me to auth0. So let's click the link. And this error here is very minor. I'm just missing an O in OAuth. So the 0 and the O are confusing next to each other. So this should be auth0 OAuth2. So I'll just save that and I'll go back and let's try login again. And now it takes me to an auth0 login page and we see Django Feed app here and I see sign in with Google. So if I wanted other things to sign in with, I can go to my application settings and then I can go to connections. And I see I have Google OAuth 2 and Google/Gmail, that's on. I can add more connections by going over to connections here and social. And I see Google again. I can create a connection. And just for an example, let's use Twitter. And I'll continue here. And we're supposed to have an API key, but I'll skip adding it for now. I won't actually authenticate through Twitter. I just want to show you the connection. So I'll go back over to the app once I enable this. And if I go to connections again, I now see Google Auth 2 and Twitter. So if I refresh this login page, I now see Twitter in addition to Google. I'll sign in with Google and I'll click my accounts. Then I'll authorize it. And now I am logged in. So I see the log out button again. So you should see that if you were able to log in correctly. And if I were to go to the admin dashboard and look, I would see a new user created for the account that I just added. And I'll take a look at my admin dashboard. I'll open up another container in my browser so I can have a different session. And I'll just log in here. If I go over to users, I see 2 users. So the first user is the user I created as a super user, and the second user is the user that was created through auth0 and social Django. And you see it already has my email address and my first and last name. So now that I'm logged in, I want to make sure that I can log out. So let me go over to my code and the views file, and I want to create another view. I'll call this logout. And what I need to do is I need to call the Django logout function. So I'll just call it here, even though I haven't imported it yet. So Django logout requests. And then I need the logout information for auth0. So the Django logout logs me out of Django itself. And I need the domain, the client ID, and the return to for auth0 so I can log out. And the domain will be from the settings. So let me go ahead and import everything just so this doesn't get too confusing. So from django.contrib.auth, I want to import logout, and this logout is named the same as my function. So I'll give it an alias, Django logout. Next, I want to import the settings. And I also want to import the login required decorator. So only logged in users can log out. So decorators, import login required. And then that's a decorator. So I'll just add it on top of the function here. So I get invalid syntax because I haven't completed this yet. So this will be settings.social auth0 domain. The client ID will be from the settings as well. So social auth0 key. And then return to, I can just say return to the home page. So it's going to be on my localhost port 8000. And then I need to craft a URL for the redirect. So it's going to be an F string that combines these things. And it's going to be HTTPS, the domain. So domain. And then the path after the URL will be v2 logouts. And then I need to pass in a client ID in the query string. So client ID equals the client ID that I have here. So I'll just use the client ID variable. And then one more value, return to. So lowercase r, capital T, return to equals the return to variable. And this is going to be the redirect. I forgot to put this on the other side. This will be redirect. So I can import that from shortcuts. So redirect. And I can just pass that URL that I just created to the redirect function. And of course, I need to return redirect. So hopefully this is enough to get the logout to work. And finally, I need to create a logout URL. So path logout, and then views.logout, and the name will be logout. So let's see if I can log out of my app now. So I'll just refresh the page, click the logout link, and I see something went wrong here. And this is because I simply typed the wrong number in the parameter. So I'll go back to the views, and this should be a 7 instead of a 0. And now going back to the home page, I have to log in again because the first part of the logout function was successful, but not the second part. So I'll log in. And now I see the log out button again. So if I click this, I am now logged out. So I know I'm logged out, the page refreshed, and I see the login button here. Okay, so now that we can log in and log out successfully, now I want to get into the core of the app, which is allowing the users to post messages. So if I go over to the code, I want to create a new file called forms. And inside of forms, what I'll do is I'll create a model form for the post model. So from Django.form, import model form, and I'll also have a text input for this. Next, I want to import the post model. So from models, import posts. And I'll go ahead and create the form. So post form, which will be a model form. And in the model form, I need to create a meta class and set the model equal to posts. The fields, I only want the text field. And for widgets, I want to set the widget for the text field. So this will be a text input. And I need to pass some attributes to it so the CSS will work correctly. So class input, and I can also have a placeholder. So my placeholder will be say something. Next, I can bring this form into my views. Here I'll say from dot forms import post form. And then inside of my index, I want to work with that post form. So I'll handle the post case first. So if request.method is post, what I want to do is I want to create the form object using the post form and the data that was passed in the post request. So request.post. And then I can check if the form is valid. So form is valid. And if it is valid, I can go ahead and create a post object for this particular form. So I'll do form save. And because I want to add something to the post, I'll have commit equals false, so it doesn't save to the database right away. And I'm doing that because I want to add a user to the post. So request.user is the user that I want to add. So if request.user is populated, it will be the user that is currently logged in. And then post save. And then after I save, I just want to redirect back to the index. So return redirect index. And I want to go into the get case. So I'll add a else block here for this if statement for the post. And this will be get. So I can create a form object for just the plain form with no data. And I can pass that to the context. So I'll create a context variable here with form and form. And then I forgot an S on forms in my form here. And I forgot an equal sign here. Okay. And then in the view again, I want to return that context. So context here. And finally, I need to work on the template. So I'll go into the index template. Inside of the content block, what I want to do is I want to check if the user is authenticated. So if they are authenticated, then the form will appear. So if user is authenticated, and I'll add the end if here. And inside of here, I want to bring in some HTML. I have it on the other screen and I'll just paste it in. And it's just a form really. So a form, I have the cross-site request forgery token, and then I have the field for the text, and I have a submit button. With all this, this should allow us to post a message. So I'll go over to my app, make sure everything is working. After the server restarted, I'll log in. And now I see the form input say something. So I'll say, hello, first post. Hit submit, and it goes away. So I believe everything is okay. If I go over to my other session and go to posts, I see hello, first post. So everything there is working correctly. So now what I need to do is I need to actually display all the posts from the users. So I'll go over to the template again and switch over to the views first. And in the else block here, in addition to creating the empty form, what I want to do is I want to query my post object for all the posts that I have in my database. So I need to import from models, posts, and I'll use that to query. So I'll just say posts equals post.objects filter. So I want to filter by the posts that aren't hidden. So hidden is false. And then I want to order by the date that they were posted in descending order. So minus date posted. And then I just want all of those things. And I'll pass that to the context. So post just like that. So now I'll have all the posts available for use in the template. And because I'm using dates in the template, I want to use the humanize filters. This should be load humanize. And then inside of my block, I'll be able to use the natural time filter. So after this if block, I want to have another if block for the post, and I'll just bring that in here. It's a lot to type, so it's faster to copy and paste. And all I'm doing here is I'm looping over the posts that I've passed to the template, and I'm displaying the first name and the last name of the user who posted. And I'm also posting when they last posted. That's why I need humanize. I'm using the natural time filter, and I have the actual post text. And for the else block, if there are no posts at all, I'll just print there are no posts. So let's go back and let's see. And this is simply because I need to install the Humanize app. I'll go to settings, and beneath the social Django here, I'll add django.contrib.humanize. Okay, so let's try that again. I'll refresh. And now I see hello first post. And if I say, here is the second post, post that, and now I immediately see it because the page is reloading and it's querying for new posts again. So now that I can create posts, I want to allow the users to delete them. So I'll create a view for deleting posts. Let's go to views. And here under index, I'll add another function. So I'll call this delete post. It's going to take in the requests and also a post ID. So the post that will be deleted. So first thing I want to do is I want to check if the post belongs to the user. So I'll just query the database for this particular post. So post objects get, the ID or the primary key will be post ID. And then I can say if post.user is equal to request.user, then I can do post delete. So this removes it from the database, and then I can redirect back to the index. So return, redirect, index, just like that. And of course, if the user doesn't own that post, then nothing will happen. It will just refresh the page. So I now need a URL for this. So let me go over to the URLs, and I've closed it. I'll add another URL for deleting. So delete /post ID. And this will be views.delete posts, and the name will be delete posts. And now the last thing that I need to delete is I need an actual button that the user can click. So I'll go into the index here and I'll find the media content here. So I want to add a media right to this media object. So it's going to be outside of this div. So div class, and we'll call this media right. And inside of this div, I want to add a button. So the URL for this will be delete post. And I need the post ID for this because I want to only delete the post in question. And I also need a class. So class will be delete to create a delete button. And finally, I need an if block around this to say if the user owns this post. So I can say if post user is equal to request user, just like I did in the view, then it will display it. Right. So now let me go back and I see the delete button and it's not in the right place and it just needs to go outside of this div. I put it in the wrong div. So now it's on the right side. So if I click the delete button, I see my post just got deleted. If I delete the first one, I see there are no posts. So first again, and now I see a post here. Okay, so now that users can post, I want to focus on the second part of the app, which is the moderation. So to begin with the moderation, I'll go to my admin dashboard. I'll add a new group. I'll call this moderators. And moderators should be able to change users, change posts, and view reports. And I'll save this. And I have the new moderators group. So anyone who has been given a spot in the moderator group will have those 3 permissions. So with the permissions, I can go ahead and add one to the view for reports. So this will be permission required, and I'll import this momentarily, but permission required, a feed app, the name of my app, and then view reports. And then I'll set raise exception to true. So if the user doesn't have access to this, they'll just get an exception. And I need to import this from the decorators. So after login required, I'll put permission required. And now that I have that, I can think about what it means to actually report a post. So underneath reports, I'll create another view, and this will be for reporting a particular post. So I'll call this report post. We'll take in request and post ID, just like delete. I need to query for that particular post, just like I did in the delete. So ID equals post ID. And then what I want to do is I want to either create a new report or get the report that I've already created. So report created. So the reason why I have 2 things here is because I'm going to use report.objects.get or create, and it returns a tuple. The first part is the object that I'm either getting or creating. The second part is a Boolean saying if I actually created something or not. So in here, I'll have reported by, as requests.user, and then posts equals post. So if I find that the user has already reported this post, then created will be false. But if they haven't, then created will be true. And then here, I just want to do report.save. Once that happens, I'll redirect the user back to the index, and then they can go and continue using the app. Of course, I'll need a URL for this. So I'll go to my URLs and I'll add report posts, and it's going to take in the post ID. And this one's missing a trailing slash, so I'll just put it there. And views report posts, and the name will be report post as well. And then I want to show the report post link. So I'll go over to index, and inside the media right, and inside of this if block, I'll add an else if. So else if user is authenticated. And the reason why I'm doing this is because if they're not the person who created the post, but they are logged in, then they'll have the ability to report it. So I'll have div class media right again, and then I'll create a button. So the URL will be report post and post ID. And then for this, I'll have a span that will represent the actual button. So tag is warning, and we'll see what this looks like momentarily. And inside the span, I'll have report. So that should be enough. So I'll go over and I'll refresh. And everything looks okay because this is my post. So what I'll do is I'll create another container, and I'll go back and log in. And I'll use a different account. Authorize it. And now I see the report button because I'm logged in a different account. Right? So if I reported this, I see report is not defined. Very small error. Just need to import the report model here. If I go back and report again, I see it redirects me in. Nothing happens, of course, that the user can see because the moderator will only see the reported post. So I see report object 1, and I see it was reported by me, and the post was first again. So now I want to be able to view all of the reported posts. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my views, and I'll go into the reports view. And here I need to first create a query to get all of the reported posts. So reports, and this will query the post model. So post.objects. And what I want to do is I want to count the number of times this particular post was reported. So I'll annotate this with times reported. And I'm going to use the count from models. So I need to import this momentarily, but I'm going to count the number of times it's reported. So I'm counting report. So report is a list on my model that's generated through the foreign key. It's not a real column that is in the database, but it's given to me by the Django ORM, and I can count how many reports are on this. So just count report. And then I want to filter by the times reported is greater than, so dunder GT 0. And then I want all of them, right? And I have to import that count. So here I'll say from django.db.models import count. So I have those reported posts. If I go back here, and I want to pass them to the template. So I'll create a context variable, and we'll just call this reports. And I need to pass that context to the template, and I should have it available. So before I modify the reports template, let me modify the base template to create a link to the reports page, just in case the user can actually view the reports link. So here is where I have the home link. So underneath here, I'll add an if statement. So if, and I want to check the permissions to see if the user can view the reports page. So if permissions, so perms.feedapp.viewReport. So if they have that permission, I'll have the indiff here. I'll add another link. So the URL for this one will be URL reports. The class will be navbar item, just like the home link. And I'll call this reports. Okay, so now inside of the reports template, I'll be using humanize again. So load humanize. And then for the actual content of the block, I'll just bring it in here and I'll explain what I've added. So I have a for loop. Let me just add some space there. I have a for loop. It's going to generate the article tags, and that's where all the information goes. But basically, it looks very similar to the posts on the homepage. It has the username, so post.user.firstname. So I'm starting from the post, then getting the user of that post, and then getting the name for that user. I can get the date posted as well. And if the user is active, what I want to do is I want to block that particular user. So I'll be adding a URL for block user here, and then just block. And then I'll also have something for hiding a user. So I'm looping over all of the reports that I have, and then I'm displaying the name of the user who created the post. So I'm starting from post, then the user, and then the name. And then I'm getting the time that it was posted, and finally the text and the number of times it was reported. So if 3 different users report the post, then I'll see the times reported is 3. And then I'll also have this if statement here to display a button for deleting the post or hiding it once I implement that. So let me go ahead and implement the hide post now. So I'll go over to the views, and underneath reports here, I'll create a function called hide posts. So the permission required in this case will be change post, and I'll have raise exception true again. I'll call this function hide posts. And in here, I need to first get the post object. So post.objects get ID equals the post ID. Next, I need to set this to hidden equals true. So I'm hiding the post. Next, I want to set the date hidden to be datetime.now. And I want to set hidden by equal to requests.user. So the current logged in user is the user that will be set in hidden by. And finally, I can save the posts and then redirect back to the reports page. Because I'm using datetime here, I'll need to import it. So from datetime, import datetime. And I need a URL for hiding a post. So I'll call this hide underscore posts. It will take in a post ID. And then the function is hide post, and I'll give it the name hide posts as well. So now I can go back to my template and I can add the actual link inside of this class here, or this anchor here. So href URL will be hide posts, and I need to pass in the particular post ID. And then the class should be okay. I am missing the second double quote, and that should be enough for the button. So before I can test hiding a post, what I need to do is I need to give a user moderator permissions. So I'll go over to my dashboard and I'll go to users, and I'll select the newest user that I created. I'll make this user a moderator. So I'll select moderators here, add them to the group, and hit save. And if I go back, refresh the page, I see reports here because I'm a moderator. I can click on the link and I see first again, it's been reported. I have this link, so I'm going to go ahead and block it. So now that goes away because it's already been hidden. If I go back to the home page and refresh, I see there are no posts because that particular post was hidden by a moderator. So the last thing I want to do is I want to be able to block a particular user. So if they post too many posts that have been reported, for instance, then I can go ahead and just block that user from using my app completely. So I'll create a function for this. We'll go over to views, and before I create the function, I'll import the things that I need first. So I need to import the user model, and I also need to import get user model from django.contrib.auth. So get user model. And now I can create the function. So I'll add this underneath hide posts. So I need to start with permission again. And the permission this time will be feedapp.changeUser since I'll be blocking the user. And I'll have raise exception as true again. I'll call this block user as the function name. And it takes in a user ID this time. So first thing, I need to actually get the user model. So I'll use capital U and I'll call that function get user model. So the reason why I'm doing this is so I can get that custom user model that I created. Then I want to query for the individual user in question. So I'll use that user model and I'll get the ID or I'll search using the ID for the user. And now what I want to do is when I block a user, I want to do a couple of things. First, I want to set the user to be inactive. So I'll have user is active is false. And I also want to loop over all the posts that user has, and I want to hide them. So I can say for posts in user.post_set.all. So give me all the posts that were created by this particular user. I can say if not post.hidden. So if it is still visible, then I can hide it. So I can say post.hidden is true. And then I can do the same thing with the date hidden, which is datetime.now. And I can also do the hidden by, which is requests.user. And finally, I can save each individual post. So after the setting the user to be false for is active, I can do save and then just redirect to the reports page. So return, redirect, reports. Next, of course, I need to add a URL for this. This will be the last URL. So block user is the URL. It takes in a user ID. Views block user is the name of the function, and I'll call the view block user. And then I simply need to add a link on the reports page to block a particular user. So I add it right after the time that they posted. And I'll say if the particular post user is active. So if post.user is active, so I don't need to block a user who's already been blocked. I'll add the endif here, and then I'll add a button to actually block them. So the URL will be URL block user. The user in question will be from the post.user.id. And then inside of here, I'll have a span class, and then the tag is warning. And then I'll just say block. So if I go back to the reports page, I now see a block link. So before blocking, let me post something. First, once again, please don't block me, right? So now if I go to reports, I see a block link. If I click block, the block link goes away. And if I refresh, I see there are no posts, right? And if I go back to the admin dashboard, if I look at that user, we see active is no longer true. So this user is pretty much blocked from using the app. After logging out, if I try to log in again, I see that it doesn't work because that particular user has been blocked. So that's it for the app. I was able to get all of the functionality working correctly. I can create users through Auth0. I can add posts. I can report those posts. I can hide those posts. and then I can block the users who have created that post.